Welcome back to Icy Chap's Edge. I am Icy Chap here with another knife review, this time looking at my favorite large fixed blade survival knife. This is the Cold Steel Trailmaster in SK5, and it is my favorite with good reason. I will speak to those points throughout the video, but first I just want to say I do not use the term favorite lightly. I have many knives, and most of them I really love and I use extensively, but this is my favorite and I will explain why in a minute. First, let's look at the fact sheet. The model number of this knife is 39L16C. Cold Steel on their site has a 16CT, which I believe is the new version of this knife. It does not have a black epoxy finish on the blade, and it has a different finish on the hilt to make it look like brass, or maybe it is brass, I don't know. Blade length 9.5 inches, overall length 14.5 inches. The steel is SK5. It is a Chinese steel, and I'll speak to that a little later. Thickness 5/16 of an inch thick, really one of the high points of the knife. The weight is 17 ounces, but Cold Steel actually lists this knife at 16.7, so it's tough to say exactly what the weight is. The handle is kraton, and the price you should be paying is approximately $80 to $90. So let's look at the knife. First thing to notice, it has a leather sheath. I've actually spoken to this before because I have a review out there on a custom thigh rig I had made for the knife. Leather is a bad sheath material for a carbon steel blade. It will absorb moisture. I'm not just talking about moisture if you drop this in a lake. This will absorb moisture from the atmosphere and transfer it to the blade. And if you have a very fine edge on your knife, like I do on this blade, it will eventually dull it simply with corrosion. So, not a good idea to store a knife in a leather sheath, no matter what type of knife it is, but especially a carbon steel blade. So, lots to talk about with this knife. Let's get started. First thing to notice, the design. It is that tried, tested and true design. Bowie blades have a great sweep to them, and just a really great strong design. Does not have the radical clip that most Bowie knives have. Very important for two reasons. One, this was not designed to be a weapon, it was designed to be a tool, and you really want to be able to pound on that latter third of the blade when you're batoning. If it had that radical clip, I simply couldn't do it. Number two is, even though it does have a ground false edge there, it still is almost the full thickness of the knife to the tip, and that makes for a very strong tip, which I can use for digging and I can use for prying. Very important to have a strong tip in a survival knife. The other nice thing about this design, really unique with this knife, it is 5/16 of an inch thick. I've never seen another production knife with that thickness. Really exceptional. Also, the length being 9.5 inches makes this a good heavy blade. Important for two tasks. One, chopping. It's a nice heavy blade. I'm going to be able to chop through wood with relative ease. It's going to carry great momentum. The thickness is important because if I want to split, which is important to get to the inside of the wood, get really jagged edges for fire making, this is going to act like a wedge. As it splits the wood, because it's so thick, it's going to push the wood to the sides and really make it an effective splitter. Another thing to notice, full flat grind. Important for two reasons. One, when you have such a thick blade, you want to make as acute an angle towards that edge as possible, and so you really can only do that with a flat grind. The other thing is, with a bevel down the middle of the blade or partially away from the spine, that's going to create another point that's going to cause friction. If you're slicing material or if you're chopping into wood, you want as little friction as possible, and you really can only achieve that with a flat grind. So excellent design there. Other thing to notice is the blade is not too wide, and with a lot of really long, heavy knives, they really make them too wide. Why is that important to not make it too wide? Really, the main thing is control. I want to be able to control this blade for bushcraft tasks. And one way to do that is to not make it too wide. I can choke up with my thumb, and those of you who are familiar with bushcraft will recognize this is a very common grip for small tasks. Gives you excellent control of the knife, And with a larger, wider knife, you probably couldn't accomplish that. But the Cold Steel Trailmaster is really designed really well for control. Just want to show you really quickly how well balanced it is. It's balanced just about an inch in front of the grip, in front of the handle, and that makes for excellent control too. It is not an unwieldy knife, despite the extra capabilities you get from the weight. Let's talk about the steel. SK5 is a Chinese steel. A lot of people shy away from Chinese-made knives because they think the heat treatment and the steel is going to be low quality. Not true, at least not anymore. I've used this knife extensively in the woods, and I can tell you, even being compared side to side with 1095 steel knives, this knife had amazing toughness. After being pounded into logs, used for whittling, etc., there was really no chipping in the edge, and I really pounded on this knife. So exceptional toughness when splitting, when chopping into wood. Also for fine tasks, I found the SK5 had as good edge holding capability as 1095, if not better. You're really only going to do better with very hard tool steels, and they're probably not going to have the same toughness. They're probably going to be much more brittle when chopping. So SK5, excellent steel. I'm really impressed with Cold Steel in their quality control, making the SK5 really, really good. As far as ease of sharpening, I was able to put a razor sharp edge on this knife with just the Spyderco Triangle Sharp Maker. Very, very sharp edge, and was not difficult to achieve in under 10 minutes of sharpening. The handle is kraton, which is an excellent handle material for a couple reasons. Number one, it's very, very grippy. There's nice texturing. I've never had a problem slipping, and it's going to be grippy even when wet. Other thing that's really nice about the handle is that it cushions. And when I'm batoning on the back of this knife, I want to cushion that shock as much as possible, which the kraton does. There's no exposed tang. Not going to have a problem with cold weather, making my blade cold and hard to handle. Another thing to notice, the hilt. This is actually the one hit against the knife aside from the sheath. I would change this design so that there's no top part of the hilt. I would cut that off, make that flat throughout, and apply some jimping to the back of the blade. This is going to give me, number one, no hilt that's going to be in the way of my hand. It doesn't protect me from the blade like the lower part of the hilt does. And it's going to allow for another surface that I can use for woodworking or to strike a fire steel. Better for survival. So no top part of the hilt, and I would have some jimping. Those are really the only modifications I would make to this knife. So why is this my favorite knife? Really, three reasons. One, excellent blade design, great blade shape, amazing thickness, really does every wilderness survival task exceptionally well. Number two, the steel. Holds up amazingly well, very, very tough, good edge retention, and very easy to sharpen. Number three, the balance and control of the knife. You can have knives with equal capabilities to the Trailmaster, but they're not going to be as easy to control. They're going to be much more weight forward. They're not going to have as good balance, just about an inch in front of the guard, and they're not going to be able to be choked up on and controlled as well as this knife. I've never had a problem controlling this knife for bushcraft tasks, and all of those things combined make this my favorite knife. That being said, it's not perfect. I would make changes to the hilt and the spine, but I have to give this knife a solid 9 out of 10. It's an amazing knife, very economical. I say go out and get one. You will not regret it. That is my review of the Cold Steel Trailmaster, my favorite large fixed blade survival knife. Hope you enjoyed it. Please leave comments, subscribe, and enjoy your day.